Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fellowship of the Golden Age. And today we have a pretty familiar face here. This is Kim Michaels. So, Kim, could you just, and hi, Kim, good to see you.
Hi.
um, so, Kim, could you just give a little bit of a background about yourself for anyone who might not be familiar with who you are, like why, your
Well,
background?
I've been on a spiritual path for 48 years now. I founded when I was 18, and I found Ascended Master teachings in the early 1980s. And since then, I've been studying those teachings and practicing invoking light from the Ascended Masters. And then in 2002, I became trained by the Masters to take messages from them, and I created several websites. The first one was called askrealjesus.com. And they are on the internet, have been since 2002, and I've published almost 80 books also with spiritual teachings.
Yeah. Well, I can say that, yeah, the work that you've done has, changed many lives, and that includes my own. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, mine too.
Yeah. So thanks for what you do. Like, yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so Kim, would you like to give your definition or a description of what a separate self is?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to describe it is to talk about a reactionary pattern where we can observe ourselves that in certain situations we react the same way always. For example, a very common one is we are accused of something, or we feel we're accused, and then we start defending ourselves. And sometimes we defend ourselves even if we aren't accused because it's so ingrained, this pattern. And so that's the easiest way to see a separate self. But the reason it's called a self is because we are conscious beings, and everything we do, we imbue it with consciousness. And so we are actually in our subconscious minds, we are creating these selves. And they're not self-aware like we are. They can't think and say, oh, why should I defend myself? It's almost like a computer program that's activated. But the reason why it's called a self is that it has a certain survival instinct. So it wants to pull us into reacting that way, because when we react, we give the self energy, and that helps the self survive. So coming to see a self means we have to overcome that resistance that the self projects at us, at our conscious minds, to seeing it. The self wants to stay hidden, so it doesn't want us to see it.
Okay. Yeah. Good. So could you actually give like an example of a separate self, and preferably like, like a twin pair? Could you give an example?
Yeah. Well, there's so many, but I remember one where really it really shocked me. It was back, I think, in 2010 or something like that, and I was facing a certain situation that I was reacting to, and all of a sudden I was just lying on my bed meditating, and I realized I didn't have the concept of cells at the time, but I realized that I had a part of my mind that was the problem solver. It wanted to solve problems. But then I had another part of my mind that was creating problems, so that the problem solver self had something to solve. And it could be all kinds of things, in specific situations. But I suddenly saw it my whole life, how big of a part of my life had been engaged in this dynamic of the one self. It wasn't really that it created a problem, it just projected, here's a problem. And then the other self projected, you have to solve it. You have to do something about this. It could be anything from trivial situations with other people to saving the world,
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a very shocking realization for me that really made me rethink my entire approach to life, honestly. Because I realized I could continue not only for the rest of this lifetime, but for any number of future lifetimes, because there would always be problems to solve on this planet, And it wasn't only that they were real problems. No, they were just projected by the mind.
Mm. And for me, like that separate self, it also well, yeah, sometimes it sort of gets involved with actually trying to solve the problem of a separate self. Like it steps in the way of.
Yeah. No, that's what I saw. That there's one self that projects that here's a problem, and then the problem solver steps in and say, "Oh, I'm going to solve this," or "I have to solve this," or "I can't be at peace until I've solved this."
Yeah.
So it's just ping ponging back between these two selves, and it can go on, as I said, indefinitely.
I know, right?
And so you have to decide at some point: do you want all of your attention and your mental energy being sucked into this, maelstrom created by these cells?
Yeah. So I'm curious, could you give an example of a separate self that is probably, it's in a bit of a general way, but unique to being a man, like a male separate self?
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example from my father. He grew up. He was born in early 1920s, so he grew up with a ideal of what a man was like. It wasn't really what you today call a macho man, but it was somewhat along those lines. That he was strong and aggressive, or didn't let anybody boss him around, and you know he wasn't talking about feelings or anything like that. So he had a certain view of what it meant to be a man, and I could see how he was trapped by it. He was trapped by it his whole life, and to his disappointment, I couldn't respond to that. I couldn't be that kind of a man. I was more of a grew up in a totally different time, of course. So I was more the modern, more soft, sensitive person.
Yeah. So are you the sort of man who'll cry?
No, I won't. Well, I have cried. It's not that, but it's not really that I do it often. But I'm more, I'm aware of my own feelings. I'm acknowledging my own feelings. I'm not so afraid to express them, or at least acknowledge that I have feelings. Whereas for him, it was like you had a facade
Mm.
that you were always putting on. Of course, I'm not saying I didn't have a facade, because I had much more when I was younger. I also had a certain facade, but it certainly wasn't the same that I had to live up to this strong, uh,
Yeah.
strong man image.
Yep, I hear you. So how, when you see that a separate self is active, what's generally, what process, how do you go about resolving that self?
Well, first of all, you have to see it. And that's often the most difficult, because we get so used to it. It's, for many of us, these selves we created in past lifetimes. So we don't remember when they were created, and we especially don't remember that we made a choice to create a self. So let's just take a situation. I've used this before, I know, but let's say that you are 5 years old, and another child, who was a couple of years older than you, is bullying you, or teasing you, or putting you down. And you, of course, react to that. And so let's say that you react by submitting to the bullying, because you don't know you're not aggressive, so you don't want to fight back. That's what I found in a lot of spiritual people. We generally don't want to fight back, so we submit. And we're not aware when we're 5 years old that we are making a decision to do this. We just think we can't react any other way. And that's probably because we reacted that way in past lifetimes and so forth. So in other words, you think this is the only way to react. So we have to come to a point where we look at our reactionary patterns and say, wait a minute, why am I reacting this way? Could there be another way to react? And that's when we can then start seeing that this is just, it's almost like there's a situation, it triggers a reaction. And once we're in the reaction, it's like there's no way out. We're on this downward slide. We are just pulled into the situation. So you have to become aware of this, so you realize that there is actually a split second where you can feel the self is being triggered. But you have a split second where you can step back and say, do I want to react the way I always do? And then when you are aware of that, you can then start looking at what is behind this reaction? What is it I believe? And I sometimes use the example, again, you were bullied when you were 5. Now you're an adult. You get a new job and somebody is bullying you at work. But you're now 30, 40 years old. It doesn't make any sense that you're reacting the way you did when you were 5. Because when you were 5, you naturally felt powerless. You couldn't beat up the older child. But now you're an adult. You have other options. You can talk to people. You can say, why are you doing this? Or you can complain to a supervisor, or whatever. There are other reactions you can have as an adult. So that's where you need to then look at, why did I react this way? What was the decision I made? And the decision could be, I'm powerless. I can't do anything about this person. And so then you can start looking at, well, why do I feel powerless? And that could then, help you see that there's a certain self there that's simply based on the decision that in this kind of situation, I'm powerless. There's nothing I can do. And then you can come to question that, and you can come to see that, but it's actually not true. I mean, I have other options. And that's when you can come to that. You can come to a point, and the process I usually go through, is I become aware of a reaction, because I have in my mind the clear understanding or realization that I am working towards a point where I have no reaction to anything on earth. I really don't have any self that's pulling me into a reactionary pattern. So whenever I see a reaction, whenever I feel what I call an attachment, because you can feel it inside of you, you can have this sense that you have to react a certain way. You have to do something about it. For example, you have to solve this problem. And that's what I call an attachment. You are attached to doing something or a specific outcome. So I'm always looking for that. When I sense that in myself, I start looking at it from different perspectives. I, of course, ask the Ascended Masters to help me see it, and they always help me. And then there comes a point where all of a sudden it's like you're not really consciously thinking about it. Often it happens that I think about it for a while, then I relax, and then while I'm lying half awake in the morning, for example, I suddenly see it. It's like now I stepped outside of it. I see it as a self. It's not me. It's not really who I am. And then you can choose to let it go. I don't want my life to be, run by this pattern.
Yeah. Yep. And so do you actually, do you follow that source to actually look at, what is the belief? You try to understand what that separate self is, like seeing the belief behind it, like how it was created?
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to know the exact situation where it happened, because this could have happened, many lifetimes ago. Like I talk about the whole avatar. I have these videos about the avatar psychology, and it could have happened when we first embodied on Earth, which could be a long time ago. So I don't need to know the exact situation, but I need to see the belief, the illusion that the illusion I believed in that created the self. So you could say that there is the problem solver self. Many of us are avatars. Many spiritual people are avatars who came to Earth to do something positive, to make a positive difference here. And so we come here, we are experience some very difficult situation. And it's very easy to go into this mindset, oh, there's a problem on Earth, and I'm here to solve it, or at least to help solve it. And this puts you in a reactionary mode. You're reacting to something on Earth. And as I said, once you have that decision, it's almost like you are deciding, I can't be myself. I can't be at peace. I can't be creative. I can't enjoy life until this problem is solved.
Mm.
But there's always going to be a problem to solve. Because as I said, even if there wasn't, the self would invent a problem, would simply come up with a problem. So I saw that it's indefinite, and so once you come to see that, you have that option of saying, and of course it can be a more self-related to other situations, that you can see, do I want to always react this way, or do I want to free myself from it? And the only way, this is the magic of this teaching the masters are given about the separate selves. See, in a way, every self, even if it's not what I call the problem solver self, but even the I feel powerless self, is always projecting there's a problem. And it makes you think that the only way to overcome the suffering, the agitation you feel, is to solve the problem outside yourself. But the magic of it is that the only way to really be free of your reaction is to let the self die. You don't have to solve anything outside yourself. And this is what I mean with we are in a reactionary pattern to Earth, because we come here, we are exposed to this traumatic situation, and we feel I can't be myself, I can't be at peace until this problem is solved. So now our inner state of mind depends on outer conditions. And now we are in this spiral of wanting to change other people or change the Earth in order to feel at peace inside ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And this can go on indefinitely until you come to the point where you realize, no, I can feel at peace inside myself no matter what's happening outside of me. But this is what the selves, they are created in response to certain outer situations. And as long as they're alive, they'll want you to respond to those situations. So it's only, and you will never be at peace. You could say, okay, I have a certain problem. When I solve that problem, I'll feel at peace. So you solve the problem. But then the self will just come up with another problem. Yeah. So you have to come to a point where you say, this is all created by the selves. It's not that there aren't problems, but that I have to solve them in order to find peace. That's the illusion. So you have to come to a point where you say, no, I'm going to feel at peace no matter what. And the only way to do this is to just let the self die. Let it go. See that it's unreal. I don't have to solve this problem to be at peace inside myself.
Yep. And so when you get to that point of, you've seen that self, and do you find it still, the matrix or those thoughts still come back again sometimes, and there's just a little bit of an ebbing off process where you're not reacting so much, but the reaction is sort of internal and you're just watching what's happening and eventually it's gone completely? Or is it a more, karate chop type thing?
Well, it can actually, I would say, can be both, because I have experienced sometimes that I had a very dramatic, sometimes you have a breakthrough, you really see yourself and you feel like you've broken through it. But even then, there's some projections coming from the outside. It's not necessarily the self, but there are outside forces that want to get you to react. And so they will project at you. So you have to resist that for a while, or resist it. But you do. What I do is when I feel this, I just say, I become aware there's a projection. I just say, I surrender.
Mm.
I just surrender. I don't need to react here. So that has been sort of my underlying motto since the 1990s, because I actually came to realize the value of just surrendering things, just letting go.
Yeah. So, big question. Are you seem like someone who has transcended a lot of separate selves and everything. Are there any selves that, you're looking at currently that are coming up? Like, would you be open to sharing about that?
Yeah, there are selves that I'm looking at. It it almost changes every day, you know. Um, but I'm always looking at my reactions. You know, how do I react to other people, for example? And I still find myself dealing with a specific self. I think the easiest way to describe it is to say that um, my life has in a certain way, especially for the last since 2002, it's been about helping other people.
Mhm.
And I feel that in order to help other people, I have to be sensitive to their feelings. But in being sensitive to their feelings, I sometimes react to it. I react to their feelings. You know, for example, I've all of my life and probably for many lifetimes, uh, I think the worst thing that can happen to me is that I hurt somebody else's feelings. You
Mm.
know, obviously you could say it's worse if you kill somebody, but you know, I'm not. That would have to be an accident. You know, so it's like hurting somebody's feelings. Um, so I would say I still have this self that I haven't quite resolved that doesn't want to hurt other people's feelings. I have another self that says, but in order to help people, you have to be open, you have to be sensitive to their feelings. So it's like, you know, by being sensitive to other people's feelings, I sometimes take these feelings in, I react to them, and um, I haven't quite resolved that. You know, how to be open to helping other people without reacting to their feelings, without feeling compassion or whatever. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's this fine line between like sympathy and empathy. Like,
Yeah, yeah, there is, and I'm still working on that. I would also say another self that I am still dealing with is being accused of something.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and it's not necessarily some big thing. It can just be like, you know, you hurt my feelings, or you're not sensitive, you're not listening to me, or whatever it can be. So I would say that I think there's still a self or a couple of selves, you know, where it's like I feel I have to help other people. I'm here to help other people. Um, and it's like that causes me to react to people. It's like I want to help everybody, and you can't. You know, I know I can't, but there's still a self that reacts when there's somebody I can't help. And I think actually what happens is that because the self that says I can't hurt other people's feelings is so strong, I feel like I can't challenge people. You know, I can't be direct with people and expose their egos or accuse them of this or that.
Yeah.
So that makes me feel powerless because there's sometimes there are people that are in a certain state of mind where perhaps by being direct, I could shock them out of it. But I feel like that's not really my way. And I think that's probably a self. I haven't quite reached that balance yet where I can be direct with people when it's needed.
Mm, mm.
I remember in Yogananda's book, Autobiography of a Yogi, he's talking about how his guru, Sri Yukteswar, he is the very direct, you know, kind of like blue flame, you know, challenging people. And he actually says to Yogananda that that's not your way of being guru. You're the more soft spoken devotional.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, and for many years that was comforting me, but now I'm thinking, but why couldn't I be both? You know, if you are, why should you be in a box? You know, if it can help people to challenge them, you do that. If it helps you people to be softer, you do that. You know, but I still feel like I have this self where I'm not quite resolved when to be direct with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Like that, yeah, it's not necessarily this or that. Like it's just whenever you feel that impulse, if it's to be direct, like then just to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
You need the
Why
self.
should you put yourself in a box? It's the self that puts you in a box and says you have to be this way.
Yeah. And do you find also like I found that if I do that direct thing, like I know that the direct part is coming from, a very genuine impulse, but then a self gets involved and sort of tarnishes the situation, like reacts to, it's sensitively to upsetting other people or even gets involved in the delivery of that message.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's the dilemma. I think is that people are very different, right? So what I've experienced now, I've been what would you call it? I've been in the public view since 2002. I've been doing these websites, and I've had many different reactions from people over the years. And you know, some people are just unreachable. They are they are so colored by a separate self that you can't reach them. And if you try to be direct with them, they sometimes get angry and they accuse you back. And I used to be much more sensitive to that. I didn't want to be accused of having hurt their feelings or this or that. So I think that's always a dilemma. How do you be yourself, say what you want to say, and it's almost like how do you be non-attached to other people's reactions without getting into a point where you are insensitive and don't care?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I think, and it must be a self that's projecting at me, I should care about other people. And that means I should be sensitive to their feelings and not hurt their feelings. But at the same time, I can also see that, I can look back in my life, I can see that there have been situations where there was something I wanted to say to a person, but I didn't say it because I thought it would upset the person, hurt their feelings. And maybe that would have been an opportunity for the person to see something that they needed to see, and they could have grown from it. And I didn't take that opportunity. So I guess, this is what if we're talking about separate selves, this is what the separate selves do. This is what the duality consciousness does. You can always find an argument that says, oh, you shouldn't do this, or you should do that.
Mm-hmm.
You're too sensitive. You're not sensitive enough. You don't care. So I think, in a sense, we're always going to face that dilemma on a planet like Earth. But we can come to a point where it isn't selves that pull us into a certain reaction. And I think, I understand at a certain level that I just have to be myself. And that's why when I started doing my YouTube videos, I just decided I'm just going to be myself. I'm just going to be open and honest and straightforward, and people will react however they react. Because I can't do anything else. And then I also have to give people freedom to react any way they want.
Mm.
Because when at the end of the day, I'm at a certain level of consciousness. I have a certain background. And I can only speak based on where I'm at in consciousness. And I'm constantly seeking to go higher. So maybe next year I'll be in a different level of consciousness. But I can only speak from where I'm at now. But I also know that other people will react based on their level of consciousness. What else can they do? So there's a part of me that understands full well that I just have to be myself and let other people react however they want. But there are still these projections at me that, oh, you should be kind, you should be sensitive, you should, not hurt people's feelings, not challenge them, this and that.
Yeah. So I'd imagine actually like doing the videos, it's a good way of actually practicing doing that because you don't have to deal with anyone else's separate self bouncing off you. Like you can just go through that full expression and be as direct as like I find you quite direct in the videos.
Oh, really? I think I'm very diplomatic.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot more I could say that I'm not saying.
Yeah.
But maybe that will come over time, you
Yeah.
know. But I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I don't. I'm not trying to play a role, and I'm not trying to really hold anything back. But on the other hand, I am not being as direct and straightforward as I could be, because you know it's almost like this. You know, you overcome a certain separate self in yourself, and then it becomes easy to see when other people have the same pattern.
Mm.
So that means you could actually be much more direct in challenging it. But I'm trying to be sort of as neutral as possible, just sort of giving people the freedom to interpret their way out of it. You know,
Yeah.
if they want to interpret it in a certain way that doesn't apply to them. This is what I've seen people do over the many years I've been on the spiritual path. I've done it myself, of course. Is you get a certain teaching that challenges a certain aspect of the ego, a certain separate self. But the ego can instantly come up with some interpretation. Yeah, but it doesn't apply to you. You know, so you can see it in somebody else, but you don't have to look in yourself. And so I'm still trying to give people some way out of it. I'm not being as direct as you could be in challenging the ego. Maybe that will come. We'll see how it unfolds. You know.
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm just curious, like, do you read through all the comments that come after the video?
I read through a lot of them,
And
but
does it
sometimes,
ever bother you at all? Like I sort of scan my way through, and I think like some of them draw a lot of reactions. Some of the videos draw big reactions from people, and others don't really. Like,
yeah. Well, I usually read the primary comments, but then there are sometimes people get into commenting on each other's comments. They get into a discussion, and I often don't read that because it just becomes too much.
yeah.
But so I just try to get a feel for it. But I mean, there are some videos where I know there's going to be a certain reaction because I am being, challenging, like the non-duality videos.
Yeah.
I am challenging these non-duality teachers because I think what they're putting out there is, actually a dangerous teaching. And there are videos on there where you see people independently of me, they have come to the same conclusion, because they were involved with these non-duality teachers for years. And the reason why I started commenting on this was that I started watching some of these videos, and here's a non-duality teacher. He's saying a lot of right things, but then there are certain ideas. It's like you're sitting there watching a video, and all of a sudden you go, "What did he just say?" And then you rewind and you listen to it again. You say, "Did he really say that? What does he actually mean? Does he realize what he's saying and what it means?" The idea of no self, for example. And I just felt I have to put out something so there's an alternative to this, so people can see there's another way to approach this topic. And so I knew, of course, that this would be challenging to some people and would elicit some negative reactions, But in the beginning, it bothered me a little bit. Now I've gotten to a point where I realized that, as I said, people that respond to what I'm saying at their level of consciousness, and I just let them be at their level. I've given them an opportunity. It's again this: you can give people an opportunity, and what they do with it, you just have to be non-attached to it. And I am generally non-attached to it, except, as I said, with this self, that if somebody says I hurt their feelings, then I can still have a certain reaction to that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, there was a while there in my spiritual journey where when I first opened up to, just going, right, I need some help here. And I was following one of the non-duality teachers. And I found it was good for a while because it just took me away from all the emotional maelstrom and the mental maelstrom I was living with. But after about a year, I just sort of felt like he's always saying the same thing. Like he's actually never really answering anyone. He's only just taking you through a process. So it was like, this is the ultimate thing you can do, and there's nothing more than that. And it just, yeah, and I felt like I just need more than this. So, it just kept me on my path of seeking. And it seems there's other people who, I think they seem to be filtering through and discovering your teachings, and it's giving them the answer they're looking for.
Yeah, but there are people who are independently of me. They have come to that conclusion, and there's more videos coming up on YouTube. Where people they're saying, I was involved with this for years. I was believing everything they said, but then I realized it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I think the real problem with these teachings is, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of existence is to achieve non-existence. Is that really the best you can do?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a total denial of who you are and what your potential is as an individual self-aware being.
Yeah. And it goes to show like that power of how a separate self can just lock you into this going round and round in circles thing. So I used to think, this particular guy, he seemed to be quite a high consciousness and everything, but I just thought, does he ever sort of look at himself and go, oh, why aren't I stepping on further? Or, not actually questioning himself. I couldn't quite fathom that.
Yeah. Well, there is probably no bigger trap than thinking you have the ultimate teaching. Because how are you going to go further then? It just becomes a blind alley. And the way I look at it is, again, the Earth or the material universe is this reality simulator where we are allowed to have any experience we want. So basically what we're doing here, I don't know if we need to go into this, but okay. So what we're doing here is, once we go into this state of separation where we're not seeing ourselves connected to our higher selves and the ascended masters, we go into a state where we are using the mind to create experiences. And it ties in with the separate self, because what does a separate self do? Basically, what does a separate self do? It gives us a certain experience of life and a specific situation, or even life in general. So I said the problem solver self. My experience of life for many, many lifetimes was, I'm on Earth to solve problems. And those problems, yeah, there are real problems on Earth, but the way I looked at the problems was created in my own mind. So the experience I was having was in my own mind. So, but this is what is allowed in a reality simulator. Once we go into separation, we are unreachable for the ascended masters. They can't reach us. Because everything we experience is created in our minds, not just one mind, but also collectively. So what happens is that in that state of mind, we have to just run the line until we can't stand it anymore, until we can't stand our own minds. And we start questioning, is this all in my mind? So what these non-duality teachers are doing, at least some of them, they have created this experience in their minds that they have now the ultimate teaching, and they are in some ultimate state of consciousness. And they are allowed to have that for as long as they want until they get tired of it. But that doesn't mean that the rest of us have to sit there and not say anything about it. I think we have a right to say, I've discovered that there's something outside of my own mind. There is a way to have experiences that are not completely created by my mind. I can relate to a reality outside my mind. And to me, that's the ascended masters. I mean, whatever you call them, they are beings who have freed themselves from separation and duality, and they are our frame of reference. Yeah. And the only way we can get out of the trap of our own minds is to connect to these beings that are not inside our own bubble. And to me, that's the real value of ascended masters.
Yeah. So I'm trying to sort of get myself back on track here. I do want to hear about your experience with resolving the primal self. Like, and could you actually pin it down and say, you know, what that primal self's MO was?
Well, there was a point in 2017 where we started getting these teachings about avatars and the primal self and the cosmic birth trauma when we came to Earth and were exposed to this trauma. And it relates to the book, you know, My Lives with Lucifer, Satan, Hitler, and Jesus. So I came to a point where I felt I had resolved the primal self, but since then I've seen that there were probably some aspects of it that I hadn't resolved. But the first time I had this experience was I had been working with these teachings. I had asking the masters to help me see something. And I woke up like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was lying there, you know, you can go into this state where you are conscious, but your body is still asleep. So it's almost like you don't have the usual thought processes, so you have more clarity in the mind. And I was just lying there, and what came to me from within were these words: there is nothing I have to do on earth. And I felt this total release, like I let go of this enormous tension, because this was, as I saw it at the time, this was my primal self, that I felt like there were certain things I had to do here on earth before I could leave. And it relates to the problem solver self. You know, there were problems that needed to be solved. But in letting go of it, you know, it was such a release that I almost couldn't walk for 2 or 3 days because my body was so relaxed and so soft. And I felt I just let go of this whole idea that there's something I have to do before I can leave. And I realized I can leave. You know, I really could leave. I don't have to accomplish anything. There's no specific result that says only when this has been achieved can you go. And this didn't mean that I went into, you know, this state you hear about sometimes where people can't do anything and they can't engage in life and they withdraw from life and they basically get depressed because nothing matters. It wasn't that nothing mattered, but it was just there was not this tension that there's something I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I thought that was my primal self. But I think there are nuances of it, you know, that it was like there's nothing I have to do on the outer. There's no result I have to achieve. But it has since also become that there's nothing I have to do in order to be myself and feel at peace with being on Earth. Because I've never felt in this lifetime been at peace with being on Earth. And that's what the masters are saying with his teaching about the cosmic birth trauma. We came to Earth from a natural planet. We came here to do something good. We had the best of intentions. We get exposed to this attack from the fallen beings, and it puts us in a state of tension. You know, we really are not at peace with being on Earth. We don't really want to be here because we don't want to be exposed to this accusations. And so what I have worked on since is coming to this point where I can say, well, I'm actually can be at peace with being here, and I can be myself. And this took me years to work through that. I really didn't feel like I was starting to get to the end of it until last year when I started doing the YouTube videos, because I had been wanting to do the YouTube videos for years, but I didn't feel I was ready. Mm. I wasn't quite resolved enough in myself to put myself out there, you know, and let people react however they want to react.
Yeah. I get what you mean. Like, you know, there does come this, I felt like I'm at this point where all of a sudden, because I've resolved this need that I have to do something, that, you know, I'm you know, I must achieve something, or I must achieve something practically on this earth. And I've just really accepted, like, you know, step back from that. And now it's allowing me to step into higher and higher, like more ways to serve. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm finding it's sort of like, so yeah, you clear away all this stuff, but then what comes next is this, what I'm starting to discover. It's about multiplying the talents. Like, you get a little bit out of the way, and then you do something, and then a bit more can come from that. Like, you can begin to and I wanted to ask you, like, your thoughts, and if you could share a bit about, what multiplying the talents means to you, and how that has appeared in your life. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take the situation again with we come to Earth from a natural planet. And what the Masters have explained is that most of us who came to Earth from natural planets, we were leaders on natural planets. We had risen to a level where we were serving other people, serving society. And it's as a result of that we came to Earth. We volunteered to come to Earth and to help, to serve here as well. And so then the fallen beings exposed us to this birth trauma. And now, all of a sudden, instead of being focused on helping others, we are focused on ourselves, dealing with the hurt, the trauma of this. But we don't lose the desire to help other people. It's just that now it becomes attention. We instead of helping other people just by being who we are doing it through these separate selves. We have this how you should be on Earth, Yeah. And I remember for years thinking about this. It's like how do you even get people's attention? Because most people are just so wrapped up in their own lives, and a typical example of this is you grow up, you're not a spiritual person, but you find a spiritual guru or movement. And because you have this desire to help other people, now you're thinking, oh, if we could just convert everybody to my spiritual movement, we would solve all problems on Earth. Mm-hmm. You could probably find 100 spiritual movements that have this exact attitude. If just everybody became members of our movement, we would solve all problems. But this is what I mean. This is where now, instead of expressing ourselves freely for who we are, for our higher selves, we have now this outer consideration. This is how we should help people. And part of the reason we go into this is that we feel when we come to Earth, we are rejected. We feel rejected, not just by the fallen beings who attack us, but by people on Earth, the original inhabitants of the Earth, who don't want to hear about our stuff. They just want to live their lives. They're just so focused on their daily lives. So we almost go into this, oh, maybe I shouldn't even try to disturb people. It's a little bit like I said, you don't want to hurt other people's feelings. Mm-hmm. Like Jesus, who comes to say, hey, there's a different state of consciousness than the death consciousness you're in. I'm offering you eternal life. And most people just rejected him.
Yeah.
And so we go into this artificial way of we still have the genuine desire to help people, but we go about it in an artificial way that really is an attempt to get back to the state of innocence and peace of mind that we had when we came. We came with this innocence, wanting to help, peace of mind, that gets disturbed. We are trying to get back to it. But now we think that in order to get back to this, we have to achieve these outer goals that involves other people's free will. So all of a sudden, our state of mind is now dependent on the free will choices of other people. And that's a very bad place to be in.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult place to be in. And I have worked for a number of years, even before I heard about the separate selves, I've worked on this, that my state of mind should not depend on the choices of other people. Because that's self-mastery, as I see it. And so I think that's the mechanism, that I'm working towards, coming to that point where my state of mind doesn't depend on the choices of other people. And you were talking about how you can come to this point where, you overcome this need to do things. And that's when you can start serving other people without you're not doing it from the motivation of trying to change your own state of mind by changing other people.
Yep.
You're just, and the only way I can see to really do that is you have a right to be who you are. This is essentially what happened. We came to Earth, and the fallen beings and the Earth's inhabitants said, you don't have a right to be who you are on Earth. You don't have a right to be the Christ on Earth. You don't have the right to demonstrate a higher state of consciousness. You should be like everybody else. And so we have to come to that point where we say, I have a right to be here. I have a right to express myself. And people can respond to it any way they want. I mean, that's not really my decision how they respond. My decision is to be myself or not to be myself. And if I'm being myself, I just let other people be. And then you are naturally working to help raise the whole. You're naturally working to help other people because you are giving them an example that you can be more than a normal human being.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way to serve the whole. And that's the way we can then say, I am actually here on Earth to do something, but I'm not here to solve these particular outer problems. I'm just here to be myself and demonstrate you can be different.
Yeah. And it's like the motivation, because the motivation is no longer about, trying to change something outside of yourself. The motivation is just this energy of joy, like, I want to do this, and that's what lifts people up. Like it's like before we came here, like, we carried with us that joy and everything, but then when it was all shut down, it all went into reverse, so that, the world was doing to us. And
and it's like we went into this thinking, okay, I'm here to help other people, but they won't listen to me. Maybe if I changed myself, then they'll listen to me. But it's never going to work. And even if it did work, what good does it do that you turn yourself into some other person? You just have to be who you are and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah. And you seem like, when you're actually, doing the videos and everything, like it seems to me that it's certainly, it's just coming from your heart. It's just something you want to do. Like it's bringing you a lot of joy.
Yeah. And that's what I said. I waited a long time to start doing these videos. I actually did it way back in 2008 and 2009. I put some videos out, but I didn't feel it was where I wanted to be. But now I can be more myself and just let it flow. And, some people respond to it and some people get angry and upset about it because you have to realize there's a certain dynamic here, right? Most people all of their reactions to life are determined by these selves, these subconscious selves that are based on duality and separation. They're separate beings. So here you come, you have now achieved a certain state of inner peace. And you're demonstrating that. And it's very, very provocative to some people. Because in a sense, they know they could achieve this too, but they're not willing to look at themselves and their own psychology. So therefore, they have to, in their outer minds, find a reason to reject you, to reject what you're saying. And the way they do this, of course, is to find some aspects of what you said, or how you look, or what you do, or how you talk, and criticize that, put that down. And once you realize that dynamic, it's like you're not as sensitive to some of these, like you talked about, these very negative comments, because you know that there are some people that will react that way. They just get angry because they know they could do what you have done, but they don't want to. So then they have to reject you, so they have an excuse for continuing to do what they're doing. And that's what I was saying about not being as direct as I could be, because I am very well aware of this psychology. And I haven't really challenged it directly, but I probably will at some point. Not that it's going to help everybody, but it might help some people see that.
Well,
Because see,
I'm sort of
well,
curious
yeah, go ahead.
to see what you're like when you are actually direct, because I find you direct already. So
I'm just more direct. No, but I mean, it's like I'm not the kind of person who is very challenging to people, but I am the kind of person who I can see a lot about human psychology. And in seeing it, I could expose it very much more directly than I've done so far. Like this entire dynamic we're talking about. I mean, it's you look at people, for example, on YouTube or Facebook or whatever. They're anonymous, right? So they are posting a negative comment to somebody else. And my first challenge would be, why should I pay attention to you if you don't even want to put your face on what you're saying? If you don't want to stand up as a real person and stand behind what you're saying, why should I even pay attention to you? It's called Facebook. You don't want to put your face on there. I don't need to pay attention to anything you say. The other thing is that these people, it never seems to occur to them that other people don't look at their comments the way they do. Somebody posts a negative comment, they think everybody is going to agree with them because they think everybody else is in the same negative state of mind that they're in. But most people are not in the same negative state of mind, right? Yeah. And most people will look at these comments and say, gosh, that's a stupid comment, I mean, there were some comments that were posted on my early videos where I thought, is this an adult or is it a 10-year-old that's using his parents' computer? Because it sounded like so immature that somebody would post these kind of comments. So I didn't challenge that, but it's just, it's like, it's like, why is it so? This is what these people never ask themselves. Why is it so important to reject what somebody else is saying? Why is it so important for them? You see what I'm saying? It's like we are exposed to all kinds of information during the day on the internet, right? And some of it, you read the headline and then you just pass it by, but it doesn't give any reaction in you. But there are these people they're just looking for something to react to. And then they have to be negative and put other people down. Why are they doing that? What is psychology that causes you to constantly want to put other people down? What is it you are not willing to look at in yourself that causes you to always point the finger at the beam at the splinter in your brother's eye instead of looking at the beam in your own? It's just amazing to me that these people don't see it. But I mean, I know why they don't see it. and you just have to say, well, these people are unreachable to me. It's like I many years ago, I had some people that were attacking me and systematically, they had this whole campaign against me. And I realized at some point, nothing I can say would help these people because they're not open to it. They just want to put me down. Anything I said, they would just try to turn it around and interpret it and put it down. So I realized I can't help these people. So why should I spend my time and attention on people I know I can't help? Why shouldn't I spend my time on people with people I can help? And I think we all have to do that. We all have to realize that certain people we just can't help because they're close to us. They're just come from a different background, they're at a different level of consciousness. And we just have to say, well, all I can do is be myself and let these people be who they are right now,
Yeah, exactly. So Kim, we sort of pretty much reached the time to finish up. Yeah. But is there anything that you'd like to close with? Any last words?
Well, I mean, I hope that the people who have followed the teachings that I have given, that the masters have given through me now since 2002, I hope they will look at me as an example and say, well, Kim has done something about fulfilling his divine plan. He's dared to put himself out there and express himself. What is my divine plan? What is my contribution I can make? And what is my psychology that I need to overcome, that I can see Kim has been wrestling with his psychology and is still wrestling with his psychology. So I hope they'll look at me like that way, because I think one of the dysfunctional things about most spiritual movement is that they always put the guru up on a pedestal where he becomes unreachable. And quite frankly, if you want me to be direct, that gives the members, the followers, an excuse for not expressing their Christhood.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm very happy that you decided to do these videos, and that so many people have decided to also put themselves out there, because I have, in a way, been waiting for years for people to, dare to put themselves out there, dare to express themselves, because how else are we going to have any impact on the planet, if we sit in our own little cave,
Yeah.
So, the Master's motto is, what one has done, all can do. It doesn't mean we all have to do the same, right? But we all have a divine plan. We all have Christhood, the expression of our personal Christhood. And at some point, you just got to dare to do it.
Yep.
And look at your reaction to it, and then work on these separate selves that are causing you to react, so that you become more and more free to express yourself. Because, if you sit there and wait until you've resolved all of your psychology before you dare to do anything, then that may never happen.
Exactly.
You just have to start somewhere,
Yeah, it's sort of mollycoddling the selves that are stopping you from stepping out. I mean, it's exactly why I was motivated to do this series, was to give people a platform where, they can actually start speaking out. Because I knew, you've never proclaimed yourself to be a guru, and I just thought, well, we're all here to express our Christhood in one way or another, and there's only one way to do that, and it's to start expressing.
Yeah. And as I said, you start expressing, then you monitor your own reaction. You say, what separate selves are causing me to react this way? Once you get rid of these selves, you're more free to express yourself. It's a win-win. And how could you lose?
Yeah.
But if you're sitting there not daring because you're afraid of other people's reactions, you can lose. You can come to a point where you say, oh, there was something I wanted to express in my divine plan. Now it's too late.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, I've seen in spiritual movements how the guru and the teachings can become an excuse for people not expressing their Christhood. And I would hope that people who are in these teachings would not use me as an excuse.
Yeah. And we've all got to start somewhere,
Yeah.
There's only one way to go, and that's one step up. So take it.
Yeah. And you can always start. You could always learn. It's like you express something, you see your reaction to it, you deal with that reaction, you've taken a step higher on the path. And then you just keep going. I mean, this whole thing about having to be perfect, there is no perfection. I mean, there is no perfection. And the wonderful thing about it is actually that every person has a certain background, which means there's a certain group of people who can relate to you because of your background, that could not relate to me because I have a different background. And that goes for everybody who's in the teachings. So I can't reach everybody, and I'm not meant to reach everybody. And that's why there's so many people needed,
Yeah. And it's amazing, with the people I've interviewed so far, that, each story, each facet that the person expresses, it's going to touch someone. Someone's going to relate to that. And what I get blown away about is that there are just so many different aspects to people. It's really sort of opening up my mind and seeing, we're not all the same. We're all very different, and we've all got, unique little gems to share with to the world. And it changes anyway. It's only really a moment, a snapshot in time on what gets captured. But it is.
Yeah, and what happens is when we are trapped in these separate selves, we see this as a negative. But you could easily turn it around and see it as a positive and say, whatever you have gone through in this life, whatever separate selves you have, whatever psychology you have, it makes it possible that there's a group of people out there who can relate to you because they have the same. So your separate selves actually become an asset for your work to reach other people. But they really mainly become an asset when you've resolved them, instead of when you're sitting there not wanting to look at them. So it's like, and it's, in a sense, you could say, go back to 2002, I'm just sitting there in my room and I'm feeling the presence of Jesus who wants me to do something for him. I could have said, oh, I'm not ready.
Yeah. And
I couldn't possibly do this. Who am I? But the reason why I didn't do it was that I was able to decide, but this is not about me. Back then I had a lot more separate selves than I have now. I was a lot more insecure, a lot more reactionary. But I had, in my mind, I had reached a point where I realized that my life really wasn't about me. And therefore, I couldn't let my personal psychology stand in the way of what I'm here to do for the masters, for other people. So if you can get to that point, and there are some very aggressive separate selves that will try to prevent people from getting to that point. But if you can just get to that point where it's not about me, and I think the only way to do that is to look at yourself and say, how much of my life is about me, my reactions, protecting myself, basically protecting my wounds, as some people say. Because there's a separate self that's wounded and it doesn't want you to stick your neck out because it's afraid of what's going to happen. So if you can start to look at that and say, okay, what is it that makes me think my life is about me and protecting myself? And you can say, well, it's not about me. I'm willing to do something. And maybe it's not so good to start with, I'm willing to do something for other people, because then you're still vulnerable to their reaction. But you can say, I'm willing to do something for the masters, because you're not going to get a negative reaction from the masters. What could I possibly express based on my background? How could I use my difficult childhood, for example, to help other people who've had a difficult childhood? How can I turn my liabilities into an asset for helping other people?
Mm-hmm.
And if we could get to that point, and I mean, some people have already started doing it, but if we could get more and more people to that point, this would have a positive impact,
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good sort of point to finish on. Like, I think that works.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Kim, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you. And
yeah, likewise.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye.